I think the important thing about the relationship between your worldview and your hypothesis is if you learn something from the experimentation done based on your hypothesis that let's say proves part of your worldview incorrect, then you need the humility to say, oh,
Yes.
my understanding of the world wasn't quite correct.
Yes,
And
exactly.
something needs to change in my worldview. The problem, one of the problems can come in when you have a worldview that is so rigid that nothing you learn can disturb that.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to Love Machine.
Welcome to another Nerding Out with That Nerdy Catholic. I am Seth Payne, and I'm here with my ever co-nerd Cesar, and we are doing one more standalone episode before we get into our new series on physics. But Cesar and I wanted to respond to a few of the comments that we've had on some of our videos, and as we've tried to say in every one of our videos that that we're not experts in this area. Cesar and I decided to start making these videos because we wanted to learn more, and in learning more, especially about different areas of science, we wanted to be able to learn more. And while we were working through it, actually this just kind of happens naturally when Cesar and I talk about things. We wanted to see how our faith fit into, or fit with, was compatible with all the things we were learning. And as we've said a number of times, and as it says in the little intro to the show, all truth is God's truth. So if something is true, it is always true. There aren't different sets of truths that are true in certain situations and not in others. If something is true, then it is true. So we're learning this whole process, and we make mistakes. There are things we get wrong. And so we wanted to respond to some of the comments that we've received, pointing out some of our mistakes and helping us see things a little bit differently than we might have said it in the episode. But before we get into looking at these comments, I want to remind you, if you go to thatnerdycatholic.com, you can sign up for our email list and get updates when we put up new content, whenever anything changes in the Nerdy Catholic world. You can go to thatnerdycatholic.com/merch and get t-shirts and mugs with the logos on it, just to show the world that you are a nerdy Catholic and that you are a very curious person. And we would love it if you could subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share these videos with your friends so we can expand these conversations. And feel free, as we are going over these comments, feel free to leave your questions and comments on any of our videos. And we want to continue this conversation with you and learn more and continue to grow and continue to learn as we go. So let's jump into the comments.
Yep. So the first one comes from Sierra Blanca. It's according to your casino analogy, the chances of rolling an 8 grows exponentially smaller as more time are repeating the process. Yeah, that's true. So that begins from the thing that have never been in a casino. So I should thought about that before putting that analogy there. No, the intention was and that was how it was in my mind when I was conceiving this analogy, was that you only win when you have one of the 6 times 6 plus 6, 12 possibilities of having. No, so numbers, so numbers go, because the chances of getting an 8 or whatever number is.
Yeah, I think if we looked at 8, which is 5 over 36.
Yes, 5 over 36. No, so the chances that we were saying that you only win if you got 8.
Yeah.
No, that was the intention.
Yeah.
At that time, I didn't know that there was, winning partially or winning if you have a bet. And of course, if you have, if you are if you have one more ways to win
Mm-hmm.
in the chances, then your chances
Yeah.
grew when you.
Yeah.
But if you let's oversimplify this, and let's say if you have one dice and you win just if you have one,
Mm-hmm.
or something like that, no?
Yeah.
So that's getting one on the first try is difficult, no? Getting one, and you have only to have ones on the second try. So getting a one on the first try and a one on the second try.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah, so
the analogy.
So
no?
yeah, so if you can only win on a 1, then
Yes.
it's a 1 in 6 chance to
Yes.
get a 1.
Exactly.
If you have to do it 2 times, it's 1 over 36.
Yes.
If you have to do it 3 times, it's 1 over
And the-
1 over 6 times 6 times 6.
Exactly. So, and the reason I want to put it like that is because in nature, if you have one thing, so if you have one of the iterations that goes wrong,
Mm-hmm.
the life ends there.
Mm-hmm.
No, you
Yeah.
don't have another chance.
Yeah.
Life ends there for that threat. No.
Yeah.
So imagine that there's in the casino. Oh, I mess it up. I can play again. No.
Yeah.
But in nature, if one of the is if the chances you get there get it. So if the mutation is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
that's the end of life.
Yeah.
That's the thing. No.
Yeah.
So that was trying to make the analogy, and really I have to
Yeah.
admit it was poor analogy on the
Yeah.
casino one. Especially
But-
for you guys that plays casino. I mean, enjoy playing casino. I have nothing against. I don't play personally, but I can understand that people
Yeah.
play. No.
Yeah.
But that was the idea, Seth.
Yeah, and I think that the idea behind that was that we wanted to, as you're saying, look at the parallel between rolling a dice,
Mm-hmm.
the randomness of rolling the dice, and the
Mhm.
randomness of mutation.
Yep.
And I'm gonna jump forward to tie this to
Yeah.
another comment that we had. So we have a comment from DJD Avdub. I'm not sure how you would pronounce that. So she's saying it's not random; it's natural selection. There's a big difference. No evidence that evolution was guided by a conscious entity. The mechanisms for evolution are well understood. So I think when we're looking at the casino example, we were trying to look at the relationship between rolling a dice
Mm-hmm.
and having a random mutation.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about before we started recording. It's an interesting comment because it says it's not random. There's natural selection.
Yeah.
Well, the selection, using that word, it denotes intelligence.
Yeah.
Right? Who does the selecting?
And the other thing that I hear this comment is not random process, it's natural selection. So if you read The Origin of a Species, what does mean natural selection? Natural selection means that species didn't survive the environment. That's it. That's as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
There's no magical force, because the minute you start, no, there's the natural selection that does this. So you are applying, as you said correctly, an entity, no?
Or it's intelligence that
An
selects.
intelligence that selects. But to be as full as the meaning that Darwin has, natural selection is it didn't survive the environment. That's that's why they die, no?
Yeah.
So if you have, for example, a process when you have 6 possibilities and just one of them give you a survival, and one of 6 is a very, very likely process, I will say life is much complex, complicated and like that, no? So life survival wouldn't be one of 6, would be less than that, no? If we apply randomly, because remember the promise is random mutation and natural selection, no?
Mm-hmm.
And the discussion, the key of the discussion is the random mutation doesn't give you the chances that for a species to adapt correctly to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And if we apply natural selection as the meaning that Darwin says natural selection means it didn't survive the environment, or it didn't survive the conditions for
Mhm.
life. That's natural selection. That's
Or it passed on the positive side.
uh-huh.
There was a positive mutation, and it passed on that positive mutation to the next generation.
Yes.
And because it was a good mutation,
Uh-huh.
then it did survive.
It did survive.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
But it's still based on the random mutation.
Exactly.
So one of the things I was thinking about is that we're not saying that random mutations don't happen.
It does happen a
So
lot.
but if you look at they just came out with a few months ago the new season of
Mhm.
the X-Men animation,
Yeah.
and so I think there are a number of conversations that came out of that to say, just going back to, well, why don't we have superpowers? These they had these mutations, and then they started getting these superpowers. Well, we have mutations,
Mhm.
but that in the world that we live in, that gives us cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
And so more likely than not, mutations are negative, right?
Somebody might correctly say that, well, it's in our own lifetime we change,
Mhm.
and that's true, but that's a guided process of
Mhm.
changing, right? So you start to develop from the origin of our own life, from one cell start to multiply. That is all a guided mutation that is coded in our DNA.
Mhm.
So, and the DNA have ACTG, don't quote me, Don, as is adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. So the four, let's say the four proteins that, and what Watson and Crick say that this structure of the DNA, those four, so we got it, for example, in computer science, we have 0 and 1s, and we build all information based on this binary system.
Mhm.
In nature, it appears to be that there are, instead of 2 states, those 4, that we build our information from that,
Mhm.
how those 4 are arranged
Mhm.
in the change of DNA. So
Well, and we can see,
uh-huh.
and there's been a lot of research done into looking at which genes match up to what different qualities or different aspects of
Exactly.
of the person.
And those genes have a special arrangement of DNA. So what we are saying in a very let's say simplified way is that you cannot randomly adapt all those 4 elements of the basic structure of DNA and say that something will come up.
Mhm.
There has to be a very delicate process, very engineered process, let's say, for that array to replicate, and that replication to have a meaning that can
Mhm.
continue life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that chances is less. So the chances of arranging those 4 elements in the longest, let's say, in the longest word that is coded in our DNA are really small to generate meaningful sequence that can derive from life.
Mhm.
And I don't remember, but somebody in our comments was asking that, was stating that the process of evolution. So the process, the analogy of a computer is a bad analogy,
Mhm.
and I will say it's true because it's more complex, not because it's less complex.
Right.
So our process is more complex than the process of generating a software analogy, because it implies that, because first of all, the DNA contains the information that the next cell is going to execute. So what happened is that the cell reads that and start the process. The correct analogy will say it's a CAD/CAM factory, So
Right,
it's
right.
the computer assistant designer or computer assistant manufacturing that reads a program and start
Mhm.
executing on what the program said.
Right. So it's both our system, our
Mhm.
DNA, our cells is both the software and the hardware.
Exactly.
And if you've seen the animations of the small mechanism
Mhm,
that is used in each one of our cells
mhm.
to read the DNA, to split the DNA, to
Uh-huh.
duplicate the DNA,
Yes.
is even more complex than the DNA itself.
Exactly. That is exactly the point that we say that this cannot be a random mutation.
Mhm.
This cannot be a random mutation. Of course, if you apply the logic on the natural selection is just saying if some mutations go against the chances of life, then
Yeah.
you have a dead
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
And the worst thing is that a dead person is not going to replicate again
Right.
because
Right.
he's dead.
Well, and also the number of chances that a random mutation would affect the part of our DNA that would actually allow us to pass on
Mhm.
our DNA to the next generation.
Exactly.
That the number of random mutations that would end up making a person sterile,
Yeah.
and they couldn't pass on their genes to the next generation,
Mhm.
is high.
That is not to say that there are persons that are sterile. Yes. And you see that, but so that's, for example, I will say something in the process of life that went wrong, but that person is still alive, but that's so we say what we see in life is that mutations that end wrong are minimal or almost not existent,
Mm-hmm.
because most of our life mutations go right and we continue living and we
Yeah.
continue passing our genes.
Yeah.
So saying that random mutation is base of life is going against what we actually see in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No?
All right. Well, I mean, I know we can continue to go deeper in that, but I want to move on to the next comment.
Yes, sir.
There's so this is a comment from Lewis McIntosh, and he says the first minute shows how bad a scientist he is. I'm assuming he's talking about one of us.
Yeah.
You should not include your beliefs in your world or your worldview in your hypothesis. That is called a bad scientist. Your computer program example has been debunked so many times. DNA is not even close to a computer program. You said that before, but I want to look at the first part of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think what it looks like he's getting at is here. You should include your worldview in your hypothesis, and I would say yes and no to that.
Yeah.
I would say you should not intentionally
Exactly
put your worldview into your hypothesis. You shouldn't say, and I know we've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
I've been down to the Ark encounter,
Mm-hmm.
and as we've talked about in some of our episodes before, the idea of a young Earth,
Mm-hmm.
or a creationist view of the universe. I would say that what I saw there, and I've heard arguments for a literal reading of Genesis, a literal view of a 7-day creation.
Mm-hmm.
I would say someone who's given an argument like that has done this, has put their worldview intentionally into their hypothesis to say, because I read the Bible literally, because I believe that the world was made in 7 days or 6 days, that I have to do my science to prove that. That is forcing your worldview into a hypothesis. But I think the point that we were trying to make was that your assumptions,
are going
intentionally or unintentionally, are going to end up in your hypothesis.
Yes, and you said, well, how bad scientific he is. So let's play Newton, for example. Newton is one of the greatest scientific in the era. So, and when he developed the law of gravity, he knew the consequence of the law of gravity. That is basically attraction among all of the celestial bodies would mean that either the universe is not static because the attraction wouldn't getting them together. So if you read Newton's biography, he starts saying that at a longer distance, gravity works as an repelling force. No, so that's his worldview being applied in his own science. No,
Mm-hmm.
the same like Einstein with the cosmological constant. No,
Mm-hmm.
Einstein is the best mind of the 20th century, I would say. No,
Mm-hmm.
if we talk about physics, but again, he admits that the cosmological constant was a mistake, like 20 years later.
Mm-hmm.
No, so your worldview is somehow because what is an hypothesis? This is something really important that we have to remember. No, when you do an observation, an hypothesis is the question you start to ask,
Mm-hmm.
and the question is not the observation; is you putting your thoughts into what you see.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see how you detach your worldview in the part of formulating your question. No,
Yeah.
no. Or it may be in many cases that you try to be as objective as possible. That's true, and that's what we were discussing here. No, but at the end, for example, if you are an atheist, you wouldn't try to, in your question, highlight if there's some intelligence behind that.
Mm-hmm.
You will say, what process will give me the a natural view of that, and
Mm-hmm.
take that out. No,
Mm-hmm.
even if the evidence shows that there's intelligence behind. No, that and this is key, because one of the many ways that when a protein is formed, and let's go to a little on the discussion of the origin of life. No, many people, and this is commonly believed, that there was a primordial soup, and how life became is that there was so many proteins and lipids around, and a thunder of ray came, and boom, there was the first life. No, so it's like saying that I have flour and sugar and butter, and a lightning came, and I do have a cake, something like that. No, so
Mm-hmm.
you see that the different element of life,
Mm-hmm.
and something like a thunder
Mm-hmm.
start creating life. That, if you don't believe me, that's the
Mm-hmm.
most common belief in the scientific world of how life was created. No?
Mm-hmm.
So there are multiple of YouTube
Yeah.
videos on that.
Well,
And
and then looking at
and I'm
the
not
science
saying,
that people
yes,
tried to replicate that,
yeah,
of just
and we
let's put a
haven't.
bunch of proteins in and see
Yeah.
if something randomly happens. We have gotten to the place where we can create very simple, elements of life, but we are the intelligence behind that.
And that's one part of the equation. So one of the I have to research the paper exactly, but one of the papers that was saying that was claiming to form a new cell was actually they take one of the nucleus of one cell,
Mm-hmm.
place it in another cell, and the paper say we created a new cell. So it's like, I don't know, saying that you have the engine of a Corvette,
Mm-hmm.
take it out and put it on the Mustang and say that
Mhm.
you create a
For the
car.
car,
No.
yeah.
You already
Yeah.
have two cars
Yeah.
and you mix. So
Yeah. So I think that's interesting then. So
yes.
you look at the as you're saying, the worldview.
Uh-huh.
If you have the worldview that there is no God,
Mm-hmm.
then that's going to feed into your hypothesis, and whether intentionally or unintentionally.
Yes.
And you could be someone that says, I am out to prove that
Mm.
there is no God.
Yes.
Therefore, I'm going to put this is going to be a part of my hypothesis, or
Mhm.
or you could just be like any other human being.
Mm-hmm.
I think the important thing about the relationship between your worldview and your hypothesis
Mhm.
is, if you learn something from the experimentation done based on your hypothesis that let's say proves part of your worldview incorrect,
Mm-hmm.
then you need the humility to say, oh,
Yes.
my understanding of the world wasn't quite correct,
Yes, exactly.
and something needs to change in my worldview. The problem, one of the problems can come in when you have a worldview that is so rigid
Mm-hmm.
that nothing you learn can disturb that.
Yes.
And that goes both ways.
Yeah.
And so if you are saying there's no way that a God can exist and create everything,
Mm-hmm.
and as you say, you start to see in your experimentation, well, it looks like there might be some outside force,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not going to say God here,
Mm-hmm.
that there's some outside force that seems to be applying some intelligence to this system. Well, maybe I should rethink my worldview.
Yeah.
And as a believer, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Our view of the universe has changed so much
In
the
last
past
century.
100 years,
Yeah, exactly.
let
in
alone the
last
past
century.
2,000 years. And so if you look at the world 2,000 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and you have this image of the earth and the lower heavens and the upper heavens,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a universe that is small enough that you could conceivably have an image of God as someone that is sitting
outside
of this sphere,
Mm-hmm.
who is bigger than us
Uh-huh.
and more immense than us, but still sitting on a throne,
Mhm.
literally
Yeah.
outside the spheres.
Mm-hmm.
And so the expansion of our understanding of the universe,
Mm-hmm.
in some minds it could say, well, it proves that God doesn't exist because that image that we had of God is incorrect. Or
Mhm.
it can say, well, we just have to adapt our image of God.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And to say that when we say God is outside of creation because God created everything,
Mm-hmm.
the larger that we see creation, the
The bigger
larger
the
God.
God.
Now
Yeah.
that can be seen as a cop out,
Mm-hmm.
to say, well, you're just saying, the argument that C.S. Lewis talks about, the God of the gaps,
Mm-hmm.
that if you don't understand,
something.
yeah,
that there's God. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But what we're saying about God is that God is not, because God is not in creation, God cannot be proved or disproved by
Yes.
any scientific process.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, that, as I said, that can be seen by some as a cop-out. But to say, as we've talked about, to when you see the intelligence, even looking back at the comment we made about natural selection, well, if you have this view of natural selection as some amazing process that moves life along,
Mm-hmm.
well, then who's doing the selecting? And maybe that there is a phrase that we can use
Mm-hmm.
for natural selection as if it were something meaningful
Mm-hmm.
that actually did happen, because there's an intelligence moving it along.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. The last part I wanna see is in the comment, because this is always not only this comment, not to pick on Luis or something like that, but this is really common, no? Your computer example has been debunked so many times, and there's more to that. When you say your computer example has been debunked so many times, it reminds me back in the days when Einstein was published his it was not the general, but the first theory of relative that he plays out that
Mhm.
doesn't include gravity. The Germans came up with 100 authors against Einstein, no? And then Einstein replied, if I were wrong, why 100? If I were, or what's 1,000 authors against Einstein, no? Why 1,000? If I were wrong, one just is sufficient, no? So when you call out, yeah, this has been said so many times. I mean, or there's somebody, yeah, there are so many scientific that say that that's wrong. There could be 1,000,000 scientific say that it's wrong. Place your argument. I think this is wrong because of this.
Mhm.
I have read
Mhm.
this is wrong because of this.
Mhm.
You don't, if you start saying so many scientific, then you stop making science by yourself. You stop thinking.
Mhm.
There could be, 1,000,000 scientific that say something, but you don't believe them because they say something. You believe them because you start reading what they said, and it does make sense, or you start reading their hypothesis, because usually when they publish it, it's in a paper format, no? And a paper format has the abstract, which is just 2 or 3 paragraphs of what is this discovery,
Mhm.
and then it goes with the introduction, with the process that they make the experiment, with the result of the experiment, and then they write their conclusions. So all that, and of course at the end there's a reference that of the literature. So that's a scientific paper. When you read that, try to read each one of the steps and try to apply your logic. Does this make sense or not? No. Is there something that we are jumping into conclusions, or reading, or in the process of making the experimentation, is there something that, because their assumptions were made, that does it make sense or not? No.
Mhm.
So saying that there are 20, 100, or so many doesn't help in a scientific discussion, really.
Mhm.
Really. And in a scientific discussion, it makes sense your arguments, or you can paraphrase, according to this scientific who say this is what, and then we can have a scientific discussion, no?
Mhm.
But saying so many times has been debunked, or so many scientific,
It doesn't. Yeah,
it
it's not
doesn't
really
add
helpful.
to
Yeah.
I can come up and say, there are others 50 million scientific that say the otherwise. It
Mhm.
doesn't help in the conversation.
Mhm.
State your arguments.
Mhm.
Say your reasons why you believe this is wrong or not, but don't call it, oh, so many scientific have said this. Yeah,
Mhm.
well, before Einstein, or even before Newton, so many people believe that the universe was static.
Mhm.
Does it make it static? No.
Mhm.
Because 1,000,000 people believe it, does it make it true? No. There was a phrase that you always say, that if the truth is true, even if somebody
Oh
believes.
yeah, even if millions believe it's false, yeah. Well, and also, I think one of the important thing to think about the scientific process is, and I think this is true for most scientists, that it is better to be proven wrong,
Yeah,
than to be proven right,
that's true.
because then
You
you
learn.
can learn, you
Yes.
can adjust your hypothesis, and you can try again. And if you have a hypothesis and you keep going until that hypothesis is proven right, well, then that's a bad scientific process. Um, and as we've said a number of times, we want to continue to learn and to grow, and you can't learn and grow if you have a static hypothesis or you have something in your hypothesis that cannot be proven wrong. You will not allow it to be proven wrong.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I want to address this one, which
Okay.
was really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a long one. Maybe we can put it on the
Yeah.
on the screen.
Yeah.
But this is from Jarek Kroshik. I'm sorry if I am pronouncing your last name wrong.
Krozik.
Thank you.
That's my assumption too. I don't know.
Yeah. So it says, I'll read the first part. No, as to the existence of the body, it would appear that the Catholic Church has dropped the ball in the interpretation of Genesis as creatio ex nihilo. First, when analyzing the book of Genesis in the context of how it was understood in the early Jewish or even early pre-Jewish Canaanite culture from which the Jews borrow. Okay. So it says the God Elohim, before he became Yahweh, as long before he was appropriated as the God of the Christian, did not create the universe out of nothing, but put in order the chaos that reign in the world. No, I'm going to stop that here because that's partially true, and that's why some of the Christian thinks that the earth is young. No, so let's read what we have in the Bible here. So this is Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. The earth was empty and formless, mass cloaked in darkness, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface. So that's Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2. And then we have, then God says, there be light, and there was light. Then together, and this make up, no, God called the light day and the darkness night. This made up day 1, no? And yes, verse 6, and God said, let be the space between the waters from. So you have the first 2 verses that says that in the beginning, it doesn't make any mention of time. God sometimes in the past, he created the heaven and earth. So in the first verse, it is saying that God creates the heaven and earth, no? And then, but I would like to highlight what Jarek said, because it's true that the 7 days is the days that God is forming the earth from this massless cloak that was in the darkness, no? And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of. In other translation, is over the surface of water, no? So at some point in the past, God created the heaven and earth. And during the 7 days, God is giving form and creating life with it. No?
Yeah.
So even if you try to be literalistic, I mean the same meaning that the Bible says, it doesn't say when God created the heaven and earth. It doesn't say that.
Yeah.
So we don't know the date. According to the Bible, we don't know the date. We know that was in the beginning. And during the 7 days, God started placing things in order. But what he placed in order, what he already created in day 1, heaven and earth.
Yeah.
So if we want to be very literal to the Bible, even in that sense, we cannot say that the earth is young.
Right. Well, and we've talked about the young earth creationists that take the Bible literally and say it was 7 days. There's also people will talk about an old earth creation that will still take the first chapter of Genesis literally and say, well, it wasn't literally a day, but the word that is translated a day could also be translated as era or epoch, but we'll still look at, well, let's literally look at the days. But I always go back to this image of, when was this written, and who, these were teachings that were taken from Moses and written down. And so I have this image in my mind of Moses. He has just taken freed the Israelites from Egypt, and they're going through the wilderness, and there's have this image in the wilderness, in the desert, this big bonfire.
Mhm.
And the people that are there, the Israelites, they're saying, why did you take us out of Egypt? Why are we special?
Mhm.
And Moses says, well, let me tell you about this God that created us.
Mhm.
And he goes into, and he's telling this story. Not that it's not true, but Moses wasn't given a revelation of this is here's all the steps.
Mhm.
God didn't say, here's all the steps that I did to create everything, and I'm going to give you the scientific proof
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
how this happened and why it happened.
Even if he give it, the people at that time wouldn't understand,
Wouldn't understand
that.
it, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And so Moses is saying to the people of Israel, here's why you're the chosen people of God.
Mhm.
And it starts all the way back with the creation of the universe. And so we have this, and one of the arguments against God creating the universe, and especially from a biblical perspective, is you have two different accounts of the creation,
Mhm.
and there are points in both of those
Mhm.
that contradict each other.
Mhm.
And if you were to take it literally, there's a different order of the way things are created. If you took it literally, you could say, well, which of these is correct? But the point of the creation narrative isn't to say this is exactly how things happened.
Mhm.
The point of the creation narrative is to say that there is a God that created everything,
Yes.
and there's a God that has brought order. Back to our comment about natural selection,
Mhm.
that there is a God that has, we don't know how,
Mhm.
we don't know all the details,
Mhm.
but there's a God that created everything, and it's had his hand in creation ever since. And I think when you look at doing science, when you look at doing research, coming up with hypothesis, doing experimentation,
Mhm.
and coming up with a conclusion, the scientific process was created by people that wanted to understand the creation that God made.
Yeah.
That they went into the saying, that there's order. We see that there's order in the universe, and we know that God created this order, and we want to understand it.
Yep. And that's a good point, because the things that start to happen. There are two things that I want to highlight from Genesis 1, and I want to read the second agreement, which is Genesis chapter 2. But in Genesis 1, there are some big takeaways, no? So in verses 1 and 2, God created heaven and earth
Mm-hmm.
outside of the 7 days.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to the description of the 7 days, there was the heaven and earth. The Bible doesn't tell us anything about what time was that. It just says God created
In the
heaven and earth
beginning.
in the beginning.
Yeah.
That's it. No. But that's implying that in the beginning, so when time started, so we got something there,
Mm-hmm.
because there was before,
There was a beginning.
Exactly. They're saying that there was a beginning. That's the first thing, no? And he create. So when he said heaven and earth, is, if you put in the mind of an ancient person, that's the whole universe, heaven and earth.
Yeah, you
What
have
I
the
see up
heavens,
and
you
what
have
I
the
see
heaven,
here,
you have the earth where we are, and the heavens, things above
exactly.
us. Yeah.
So what is he saying is the whole universe was created sometimes in time, in the past. No? Then comes the 7th day. The most important takeaway is that nothing happens until it says, and God said, and then thing happens. No? So, for example, in day 3 says life came. No? So we got here. So the season in day 3, and God said, let the water beneath the sky gather in one place, so dry ground may appear. No? And so it was. God named the dry ground land, and the water ceased. And God saw it was good. Then God said, let the hand burst forth with every sort of grass and seed-bearing plants. No? And then let the trees grow from which they came, and so it was. No, let the land be filled with seed bearing plants, trees, and the seed produce plants and trees to be like kind. No, and God saw it was good. So we see that in day 3, God speaks twice.
Mm-hmm.
The first time is to place the seed contain the seed, and the second time is to create life.
Mm-hmm.
No, so it is important to notice that life didn't create it as a consequence of making the seed. There was
Mm-hmm.
the word of God in day 3 speaking
Mm.
twice, the second time to create life.
Mm-hmm.
No, and similarly in day 6 when he created the animals. No, he created the animals, he created all, but then in day 6 God speaks a second time
Mm-hmm.
just to create the humans.
Mm-hmm.
No, so there's that is a very important distinction. That is a big takeaway, because nothing is new unless it God says,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can state comfort. We can state. So if we have the Christian point of view, we can state that animals can evolve, but humans are something special.
Mm-hmm.
No, even if you believe that there was from primates,
Yeah, primates.
primates was evolved into human.
Mm-hmm.
There was something that happens
Mm-hmm.
to that primate that came up into a human being.
Mm-hmm.
No, and that's stated by the Bible, and God says, no.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you believe that there's even some scientists believe that there must be something special that give consciousness to that primate, then why you shouldn't go all the way around? No.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
so you believe that there's a special intervention there that brings from A to B.
Mm-hmm.
You can easily quick that A was made it, because
Mm-hmm.
why believe it the special intervention and confine it to some point? No.
Yeah.
So that is why if we want to see how this brings, we can study from the from the scientific method what happened. No.
Mm-hmm.
But as the purpose of why we are here, who created us,
Mm-hmm.
science cannot answer those questions.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
because they are outside of the realm of science.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember I've heard. I know Father Mike Schmitz has said this before, but I've heard. And I think I've heard Bishop Barron say this too. But looking at science, that science answers the what and the what and the where. Philosophy and religion answer the who and why.
Yeah, exactly. The purpose, no?
And how. Science answers what, where, and how.
Yeah.
And philosophy and religion answer the who and why.
Who and why. That's a very important distinction, no? Whenever we try to put science to why, then we are stepping outside the realm of science, no? So that's very good.
So I want to. The last thing I want to address is this last comment by Jarek.
Yeah.
How the science that is clearly demonstrated there was never the first created human can agree with the Catholic religion claiming not only opposite but also that this human being was created with specific characteristics such as being morally good or even better, immoral. And that it was his disobedience that created the evil in the world. It's absurd. This, I think this goes into what we were just talking about looking. You can't use science to say why, and so we have this. We see this world with evil in it, and I don't think anyone can contest that there's evil in the world, right? and so we have this, but we also have a world where there's a lot of good, right?
Yeah.
We have a lot. We have, you can look at look at the news, or just look at the world around you, you can see that there are people doing awful things. You look at all the shootings that have happened in our country in the past few years.
Yeah.
We can see, even you look at the wars that are going on right now. You can see that there is evil in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also see examples of great compassion
Yes.
and people that care and are willing to lay down their life for other
Yes.
people.
Yes.
And so this is something that you can't look at scientifically.
Yeah.
You can't say, well, prove to me scientifically why this evil thing happened.
Yeah.
Prove to me scientifically why this person gave their life
Yeah.
for someone else. And that's, one of my dreams. At some point I would love to have Bishop Barron, if he
Oh,
would
that
ever
would be
come on
great.
and have a conversation with us, because he is very eloquent in talking about this worldview of scientism, that as we're going back to this idea of bringing worldviews in,
Mm-hmm.
this worldview of scientism, to say that for something to be true, it has to be proven scientifically,
Yeah.
and very narrow view of scientifically.
Very
but-
narrow view of true, I would say.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we know that there are true things even in our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I love my children.
Yeah. Prove it
I
scientifically.
can't. I can't.
What
and I
will be your experimentation or your
Yeah.
hypothesis?
I know, and if I even tried to prove that scientifically, it would be awful, because I'd have to say, all right, I have 2 daughters. One of them I'm going to love, and one I'm not going to care about.
Oh, that would be awful.
But we know instinctively that
Mhm.
there's truth that we can't prove scientifically,
Yes.
and so seeing the world, I can use logic to say, well, there's a reason why
Mm-hmm.
there's good in the world and there's evil in the world. And one of the other things I remember learning from Bishop Barron was this idea that the proof of God from desire.
Mm-hmm.
If you're hungry,
Mm-hmm.
it proves logically that there's something to satisfy that hunger, that I need
Yes.
to eat. If I'm thirsty, then that proves that there's that I need to drink.
Yes.
I have a desire to understand more and more. I have a desire to really to understand the infinite.
Mm-hmm.
That shows that there's the infinite exists.
Yeah, the concept of infinite is there.
And,
yours. Yes.
And I have a desire for good,
Mm-hmm.
and yet, as Paul says, I do what I don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my own life, I know that I want to do good things, and there are times when I don't. And so,
And not only you, everybody says.
yes, I don't think there's anyone that
That
can
say,
say
I'm
otherwise.
only doing good in this life.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that shows that there is a reason for that. And so, looking at our religious worldview, seeing this image of creation, that God created everything good,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a moment when we disobeyed God,
Mm-hmm.
and sin came into the world. Now, are we saying exactly how that happened? We have no idea exactly how that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But we can say that there is good in the world and there is evil in the world, so that happened at some point.
Yep. The other part I wanna tackle on that one is the very first statement. How the science has clearly demonstrated. I would love to see that demonstration. Is it? Can you? No, I'm serious. I'm not joking.
I'd like to see that paper.
I would like to see the paper on say, well, this is what I see. This is my hypothesis. This is the experimentation that I ran, and this is my conclusions that I clearly demonstrate that there was never a first created human. How can you demonstrate that? I don't know.
Mhm.
I'm sincerely asking, if you have that paper, then show it, because that will be a great revelation as far as I know. No,
Mhm.
but if you are just listening that science clearly demonstrated that, then maybe there's an invitation here
Mhm.
to challenge that.
Yeah.
Okay, how is that demonstrated? What kind of experimentation did you make to demonstrate that there's no way that there was a first man and a first human?
Mhm.
How do you demonstrate that?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
and how do you run your experimentation? I mean, seriously, no,
Yeah.
because this is the thing, when we have, and that's why I put it the worldview here,
Mhm.
because sometimes you see, and I won't get this right now too far in deep, but many people thinks that because there's a PhD that says something, that must be true,
Mhm.
or if there is a scientist, a scientist that is so well known, whatever that person said must be true.
Mhm.
No, we cannot say it's true or not. That's why we have a scientific conversation, because you use your arguments,
Mhm.
and you explain your reasons, you explain your experimentation, and you explain how you drive your conclusions from your experimentation. Then we can have a scientific argument.
Yeah.
But saying just how science has clearly demonstrated, you're not even telling me who, because science is not a person. No, there must be a scientific that has a paper that says something, and say, but it doesn't help in the conversation putting a statement like that.
Yeah.
This is, if I would say, how theologians has clearly demonstrated that God created heaven and earth, everybody will tell me, yeah, you are being dogmatic.
Mhm.
But when we say how science has clearly demonstrated, aren't we being dogmatic too?
Mhm. Yeah.
We have to explain with argument, with reason, not with just a statement saying that science, not even
Science
mentioning the
proved you wrong.
person.
Yeah.
Yes,
Science. Yeah.
please,
Well,
this doesn't help the scientific.
Yeah. Well, and as you said, even just saying someone that has a PhD isn't always right
Yes.
because they have a PhD. You look at videos with Neil deGrasse Tyson,
Mm-hmm.
and I find it's very interesting to watch videos with him just discussing things. And I subscribe to his YouTube channel, and I enjoy a lot of his conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very easy for him to slip into from a here's the science to, well, this shows that God doesn't exist, or
Yeah.
that he is showing his worldview,
Yes, exactly.
and he was showing how he is trying to prove or demonstrate
Yep.
his worldview by the science that he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
and that you can so that whole, going back to the conversation we had about the worldview, you can't not have a worldview.
Yeah.
And so the science and the worldview are related, but they're not connected. And so you can't just take we're not telling you to take our word on it either. We're
Mhm.
not saying these two guys on these two nerdy Catholics on YouTube
Uh-huh.
are telling me that God exists, therefore I have
Yeah.
to take their word on it.
Yeah.
We're telling you to observe the world around you.
Yeah.
And I would recommend reading some C.S. Lewis, because C.S. Lewis was in his early years an avid atheist,
Mm-hmm.
and he I think he tried to prove logically that God doesn't exist,
Mm-hmm.
and yet he came to a point where something changed in his life,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, well, this world, seeing the world that God created it, this actually makes a lot more sense. It wasn't proven scientifically to him, but he came to understand God through reason and logic.
Yeah. I would like to invite everybody here in the conversation that when you try to bring arguments to the table, no, try to even if you can, you can say, well, this scientific in this paper is
Mm-hmm.
saying this, no?
Mm-hmm.
And that's much more helpful than saying science has said this,
Mm-hmm.
no.
Yeah.
And because and that this doesn't help the scientific conversation even, no. And as says, I completely agree with you, Seth. We are not telling you that take our word, no, but do your own research. And sometimes the same scrutiny that you put on the on the religious belief, try to put it also on the scientific statements, no.
Mm-hmm.
And you will discover that some of them, not all, but some of them may be dogma too.
Mm-hmm.
Dogma from a scientist
Atheist.
world of view, that science is.
Yeah, from an atheist worldview.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up.
Yeah. Well, we have just addressed a few of the comments in our videos, but I want to say, to wrap this up, that both Cesar and I really appreciate getting these comments.
Yep.
And that I think I agree with him that I if you have a paper, if you have read a paper that says, I think that the conclusion of this paper goes against something that you've said,
Yeah.
share it
Bring
with
up.
us.
Yeah, sure.
But I think that the moving this conversation along is one of the reasons why we're doing this.
Exactly.
And so we really appreciate the time that you've taken to write these comments and to be part of this conversation. And so as we move into our next series, we encourage you to continue to take in what you've heard, do your own research, think through this, think through all the things we talk about on your own. Share the comments, and we'll come back and we'll do this again at some point, looking at more comments. But we really appreciate the time that you've given to listen, to watch, and to really wrestle with some of these ideas.
Yep. Yeah, I really appreciate those comments, and please keep coming with that.
Yeah. And to wrap up, I want to just remind you, if you go over to thatnerdycatholic.com, you can sign up for our email list and get an update on when we put out new videos, new podcasts. If you go over to thatnerdycatholic.com/merch, you can buy cool swag, and that is really one of the best ways to support us financially for some the time and the equipment and other things like that. And we would really appreciate it if you subscribe to this channel, comment, like, and share it with your friends. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yep.
God bless.
God bless.
System shut down.